Hello folks, welcome to week 11 of learning how to draw with me, China Jordan. This week I thought we could draw something very classic of an artist. It's like a rite of passage. It's the classic mug. Now in this lesson there's a lot of blending and we kind of work our way up to the drawing, making sure that we're not too nervous and just kind of etching our way to those darker shades because often it's quite scary. So I wanted to take our time a little bit and work on the form, make sure we're happy with our symmetry and our outline, and then we want to ease into the shading. So grab your pencil and your paper and let's get started. The cup is quite a classic thing to draw, so I really hope you have fun with this and take the time to get that symmetry and that beast of an oval. I bloody hate doing ovals. So what I'll do with my drawing instead is avoid it like the plague. So what I want to do to start is just get these two edges, which are not straight, but if yours end up being completely vertical, that's absolutely fine. And then I want to get a nice curve at the bottom. So the bottom isn't a straight line, it's actually the same curve as the oval on the top. Well, most likely it is, because if this is a cylinder, it's going to be a direct correlation with the curve on the top. So what I want to do is make sure that these two curves are exactly the same sort of bend. So it's worth just spending a little bit of time trying to get your oval right, and you need to make sure that it's always bending. Think about where your peak of the curve is, think about where your edge of the curve is, and think where the lowest part of the curve is. Now I will be doing a full episode on ovals at some point, but for now I just wanted to draw something really nice. Now, with the mug, you need, well, we have the opening, but we don't have the lip. So you just want to draw an oval on the inside. And when you think about the spacing, think about the thinner ridge being at the back and the thicker ridge being at the front, because obviously we have perspective. And that means when something's further away from us, it's smaller, and when something's closer towards us, it's thicker. Now, after you've done that, you can add the handle. Now, if it's not perfect, I'm sure no one's going to be sad or angry at you, but you just want to at least try and get it so you can fit a hand in it. That's all I'm asking for. I think handles are underrated, and I think they're a lot more challenging than what we think. We think, oh, a cup is easy, a handle's easy, but I do struggle with a handle because they're often designed in an interesting way, and they have to be able to fit a couple of fingers in it, excuse you, and you have to often try and get symmetry in a different way. So trying to make sure that the clay is the same thickness all the way through. Is it at an angle? Well, how do we make sure that that's coherent? So again, spend a little bit of time on your handle, keep carving away at it, making sure that it's a solid form and it doesn't look like it can break. If it looks like it can break, stop, do it again, because it will just ruin your drawing. Once you've done that, now we've got a modern mug here, and it's been glazed in one of those fancy glazy layers. Now, I once went to a pottery course, well, several pottery courses, trying to learn how to glaze my pottery, but both times you just had to paint it with your hands, and I was so devastated. I was like, God's sake, I just want to learn how to glaze and make cool things like all the other potters, but I'm still yet to find one. So if you know of any cool pottery schools with a wheel and a glaze thing, let me know. Hit me up. Okay, so that's our outline done. The next part is all about the shading. So make sure you're happy with your drawing. It is worth spending time on this before you shade, but once you're ready, we're going to start with the lightest shade. Now, often I do say start with the darkest, but I figured on this one, we might need a little bit of warming up into it because it's soft and it's a classical thing, so why don't we just edge our way into this with a little bit of care and softness and a more of a gentle approach. So what I want us to do is start in the light bit and just get an even shade that's nice and light with your 2B pencil. And you're just going to fill in that bottom light bit. So don't worry about anything else right now. Don't worry about any detail. I just want you to fill that in and make it as smooth as you can. You can go in a couple of different directions just to fill in that grain. But once you've done that, then I'd say you can start to push your details a touch darker. So you'll notice that my shading is becoming slightly darker on the right hand side, and there's a little bit of a shadow underneath. So we're showing that this is curved. Before it just looked flat, but with gradients like this and subtle changes, things start to look really curved. So I'm starting to show myself more than the audience that this is a curved shape, and I'm starting to see the form and be able to imagine the rest of the picture much easier just from this base. So let's get this small bit of detail on there, and then we can start to do the same process in the glazed part above. Fab. So we can see now that it's already starting to look curved. So why don't we just add a little bit of dark in the opening? This is quite a significant area, and if we can start to get a bit of contrast, actually this could be really good for us. So grab your 8B pencil and let's just start working in that empty space. So I'm just working from left to right, and you can see that I've got a bit of a gradient. I think this was an accident. I was trying to get it all one shade to start, but I just love gradients. So we want this to be the opposite in terms of lighting. We want it to be dark on the left and lighter on the right, whereas the bottom was lighter on the left and darker on the right. So let's pop this in with our 8B, and it's going to start to really take shape for our drawing. So just keep looking, make sure you're not pushing anything dark where it doesn't need to be. I think the temptation is to sometimes just fill it with black, but that doesn't work as well as trying to have a bit more of a gradient in our artwork. Cool, so you can see that I'm aiming for this really soft touch all the time. So I've switched now back to my 2B pencil, and again I want to just knock off all of that white for the main part of the cup. So I'm just trying to get my pencil lines as close together as possible and trying to fill in all that paper, get rid of the white. Now, for the actual cup, this is darker than the base, so eventually it will become darker than that first part that we did. But for now, we want to just build up that tone a little bit slowly. So it might look like it blends in with your base to start with. Just keep an eye on the edge. Don't worry about making it like really dark or pushing your outline really hard, because that could sometimes ruin your drawing. So instead, just try and get the white coloured in, get a nice grey, and then we'll push the detail very, very soon. Yeah, so nothing to really write home about at the minute. And you can see I've left a few gaps just at the bottom there, but I was struggling to see the difference between one section and another. So I was like, do you know what? I'm going to shade this darker anyway. I'm just going to leave a small gap. So at this point, this is when we can push it a little bit darker, because a glaze is a bit more 3D. It's like a thick texture on top, so it does create a bit of a shadow. So what I'm doing, instead of just drawing a thick dark line, I'm actually trying to blend that edge in. So I'm just moving across, trying to get the edge of the glaze and thinking about the size, thinking about the edge, and I'm not leaving it to be a harsh line. So just work across that, and you can start to push the whole area a bit darker in general if you're feeling ready and comfortable to. So hopefully you're starting to see a little bit of a result with your drawing. But I always find with things like this, it's not often in the first 15-20 minutes that it starts to look good. It's actually in the 25-30 minutes when you've spent time in it, because I think the early stages it's all just like quite cartoony and frustrating. So do persevere with this and just keep watching what I'm doing. So now I'm trying to work on the form and the curve, and you'll see my direction is kind of going in the direction of the cylinder itself. So it's bending slightly, and I'm not doing massive lines that go all the way across. I'm just trying to break that down into smaller chunks and showing that this bends around to the back, and each section I'm doing is becoming lighter towards the light source on the left and darker as it bends around away from the light source. So this is the part where we start to show the curve and the form, and then after we're going to add more detail. So Once you've done that, you can then move on to the next stage, which is adding more detail and more of that reflective textured surface. So on this cup that I'm looking at, you can see the handle reflected onto the glaze itself. Now, you're not drawing a handle, you're drawing its reflection, which in this case is a bit like an old telephone that's been pulled down in word art and stretched. So it kind of cups the handle, and then just pulls down, and it's a little bit darker than the rest. But you'll also find that in my drawing, it's definitely not anywhere near as dark as it should be. So again, I'm just edging towards meeting the tone that I want and just trying to blend in around it and make sure it's not standing out like a sore thumb. The surrounding areas need to be just as much cared for, just like the detail is. So we're going to just work on this section a little bit more, and we're going to start to push the darker bits a little bit darker and start to get that form looking even more 3D. So most reflective surfaces will have little highlights here and there. And in this glaze, there is a thin highlight on the left-hand side. So all I'm doing, instead of rubbing anything out, I'm just shading a little bit darker around it. And that leaves a nice light glow underneath. So once we've highlighted that, we can then pull that gradient across to the right and show that this is more of a dynamic cup. So I want to get that, those highlights on the left a little bit more contrasty, and I'll do that by making everything around it a little bit darker. Then we get to bring everything together and do some of the handle, because it does look very weird without the handle. So let's do the same process. We'll add a very average shade over that, and then we can start to add some darker detail. So you're really looking at where your light source is, what part of the handle is dark, what part is light, and don't be afraid to mix up your pencils as well and think, okay, well, this is super dark, especially where the handle meets the cup, so you can make that, well, very nearly black. And then you're thinking, where is the shadow being formed on this? Is it underneath? Is it on top? And then try and make sure that it's opposite. So here underneath is dark, and then on top is light. So you don't want that to blend too far into it. You want to keep the differences between the light bit and the dark bit. So it's starting to look really good. Now, that was basically a rehearsal, and you started to see where darker areas are, and you start to push them in, but you probably use your 2B just like me. So what I want you to do at this stage is I want you to start to push your detail in. You're going to use your 8B and make sure that you're getting the contrast, getting the shadows, getting the light bits, and this is what really pushes a drawing to look like a realistic object. So leaving really light bits that show reflection is incredibly powerful when it comes to a shiny surface. And we need that next to our dark areas to show that that's shiny, because we know that reflection is bright. It's just something that we kind of know, but we were never taught. This is something that we have observed as humans, and we just know subconsciously that that's how shine works. Otherwise, if it had no shine and no light bit, we would see that as a matte object. So this contrast helps to tell the eye that this is a shiny object. So in your the next stage of your drawing, focus on trying to push your shadows and keep your highlights nice and bright. So this is going to be a really exciting time for you, and I'm very excited to see the work. But feel free to watch the rest of this video before you commit to it, and then give it a go on your own. Remember, you can download the picture, so you can stop and do it in your own time. And also remember that everybody's will be different, and everybody will see different things. So you might actually see something much darker, you might see a shape slightly differently. But allow yourself to see things, because that's when we really learn and when we develop. So I might see something that you won't, and vice versa, and that's not a bad thing at all. So when you're ready, add a little shadow underneath so that the cup is sitting on the table, and then there you go. There's your wonderful still life of a very lovely cup. As always, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next week for another lesson.